Many people have probably heard of Tesla's mission, namely, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. But that's Tesla. To understand Elon's overall strategy and vision, you need to go back to before Tesla even existed, all the way back at least to when Elon was in college in the early 1990s.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
According to Ashley Vance's 2015 biography, when Elon was in college, he spent a lot of time pondering how he could change the world and what direction that would take. Time and again, he apparently reached the same conclusion. According to Vance, he viewed the internet, renewable energy, and space as the three areas that would undergo significant change in the years to come, and as the markets where he could make a big impact. He vowed to pursue projects in all three. Note that last sentence. He vowed, that is, he made a commitment to pursue all three. To Elon, this was not some passing fancy or light-hearted promise. How do we know? Because despite all the physical, financial, and emotional obstacles, despite the non-stop naysaying from the press, the experts, and even friends, despite all the pain and suffering that he has had to endure spread over the course of decades, he has kept his promise, and he's still charging full speed ahead. Let's quickly take a look at these three areas and see what Elon's doing with each so far. Starlink is the key to Elon's internet ambitions. Still only in its infancy, we can only speculate as to its potential importance and what it will be capable of contributing to the world. But this much is clear. Once fully realized, Starlink will give anyone, anywhere, the ability to connect with the rest of the world. Information will be able to flow freely and uninhibited. If knowledge is power, then Starlink can be seen as the great equalizer. With the addition of Twitter, which has now become X, Elon doesn't just have information infrastructure. He has a platform with the potential to centralize all types of financial transactions and make them cheaper too. His earlier company, X.com, was never able to fulfill his dreams of removing the inefficient, greedy, and even corrupt banking middlemen. But you can rest assured that his new team is hard at work trying to turn this into a reality. We'll go deeper into both Starlink and X in future episodes because each deserves a closer look. Tesla is the energy branch of Elon's vision. At its heart, Tesla is a renewable energy company. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's best known for making electric cars, and that much of the electricity that currently powers those cars might be produced from fossil fuels. That's just the way things are now. Tesla is working like crazy to make renewable energy cheap and accessible to everyone. And when everyone in the world has all the energy they need, well, that's a topic we'll cover later. Finally, there's SpaceX, the realization of Elon's dream to make humanity a multiplanetary species. Now that SpaceX is self-sufficient, and has worked its way up to launching massive rockets, it is on the cusp of its next phase, leaving Earth orbit. First, the Moon. Next, Mars. After that, the stars. And no one is better equipped to send humans out into the solar system because no one else can match SpaceX's speed of innovation and manufacturing efficiency. As a side note, I should mention that artificial intelligence has become yet another prong in Elon's approach to changing the world. Recent developments in AI have alarmed him so much that he has become extremely concerned about its potential for causing harm, so much so that he even started his own AI company earlier this year, XAI. But as important as artificial intelligence is to discuss, I'm not going to touch upon it in these initial episodes, though I have no doubt that we'll cover it plenty in the future. For now, I prefer instead to cover what historically had been Elon's three areas of focus. So why these three areas in particular? Why the internet, renewable energy, and space? To answer this question, we have to think like Elon. Elon is first an engineer and scientist, with a heavy emphasis in math and physics. To see things as he does requires looking at problems through the perspective of first principles. As Albert Einstein once said, "If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions." Reasoning using first principles is all about looking at your most basic assumptions first and seeing if they are correct. Then you have to look at the problem and break it down into its most fundamental principles. As Elon said before, with first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then reason up from there. The very creation of SpaceX, for example, involved using first principles. At first, it was assumed that the only way Elon and his team could get to space was to buy rockets, most likely from the Russians. But when the Russians refused to sell him any, Elon reviewed his assumptions. After doing a thorough cost analysis of all parts and raw materials needed, his team was startled to find that, theoretically, they could build a rocket themselves for a mere 2% of the typical price of a finished rocket. Reevaluating their assumptions changed the problem from "how do we buy a rocket" to "how do we build one?" One of Elon's most beloved books, and one that has influenced him to a degree that most do not appreciate, is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Part of that book tells of how an ancient advanced civilization built a supercomputer to answer the ultimate question. After eons of calculations, the machine's answer was given simply as
42.
Nobody understood the answer.
42?
Worse still, neither they nor the supercomputer could remember what the ultimate question was. Applying this story to Elon Musk, think of it this way. Elon's brain is the supercomputer, and the answers that come out of it are the internet, renewable energy, and space. And kind of like in the book, these answers didn't make sense to a lot of people when he first uttered them. But that's rapidly changing. So what was his ultimate question? I'm not satisfied that it was merely, in what markets can I make the most impact, as suggested in Ashley Vance's biography. That's probably just the tip of the iceberg, a summary of his future strategy, with all of the underlying motivation removed. Perhaps he has explicitly stated the question in some interview, but if so, I haven't heard it yet. So for now, I'll just assume that the ultimate question he wrestled with was, what can I do to make the world a better place? I will further assume that when he looked at the world's problems, like hunger, poverty, war, pollution, crime, etc., he had to determine what the real sources of these problems were and what he could do about it. Again, Elon has previously said in Vance's book that the internet, renewable energy, and space were the markets where he believed that he could make a big impact. In other words, he was already taking into account with these goals the knowledge of his own limitations. His solutions were always going to be very practical. Elon said before, "I really was thinking about this stuff in college. It is not some invented story after the fact. I don't want to seem like a Johnny-come-lately or that I'm chasing a fad or just being opportunistic. I'm not an investor. I like to make technologies real that I think are important for the future and useful in some way." You'll note that his areas of focus don't really affect human nature, perhaps because Elon felt that was outside his sphere of influence. And I won't pretend I'm smart enough to deduce all the reasons that led him to the three answers of the internet, renewable energy, and space. However, I feel that my general assessment of his motivations makes sense, given that Elon has said that all of his efforts, if successful, will lead to a world of hyper-abundance.
This really will be a world of abundance. Any goods and services will be available to anyone who wants them. That it'll be so cheap to have goods and services, it'll be ridiculous. The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
To understand why abundance is such a desirable goal for Elon, you just have to look at all that entails, which is really quite a lot, and the ramifications. An abundance of goods and services at extremely affordable prices means, well, dare I say it, no hunger, no poverty, at least not as the human race has thought of it thus far. It also means cheap health care and, crazily enough, no war. After all, most wars historically have been fought to get other people's stuff. But if people have all they need, they won't be willing to fight in a war because there's no point. This is obviously just an oversimplified, shortened version of the logical extrapolation that Elon might have done so long ago, and we'll devote more time to discuss the age of abundance later. What's important for now is just to understand that Elon chose this path from a position of reason and then dedicated his life to it. Thus, one way to interpret Elon's actions is that with every product he makes or every company he creates, he is taking another step towards answering his own ultimate question.